As you can see, we're going to be talking about learner autonomy and the idea of letting students lead, letting students take some responsibility for their learning, for what they learn, for the direction of the lessons. A really interesting idea that we've touched on a few times in different ways in different webinars, but we're going to be looking at it exclusively tonight. And I'm joined here by my colleague Ruth, who's the other academic manager in MLA. And just before we start, just to let everyone know, as always, you will receive a certificate of participation and a webinar handout will be sent out tomorrow. If you don't receive it, check your spam, but you can always email me at formazione@MLA World and I'll get that straight out to you. You should receive it automatically, so you don't need to write to request it unless you don't receive it tomorrow by close of business. The handout will include all the information from the slides here, plus some useful links. Anyway, to start off, I'm sure everyone can agree that we've all had teachers when we were young that inspired us, perhaps even to become the teachers we are ourselves. We all seek to become like these teachers and want to inspire that sort of achievement in our students. So often it was because we felt like we were being heard and treated like adults, not like the children that we were at the time. So the idea of this webinar is why not give your students some freedom to become these independent learners and take some responsibility for their learning. Okay. Let me know in the chat. Do you let students choose some aspects of their learning? How? And also let us know in the chat if you remember a teacher that particularly inspired you when you were young and why it was. Or maybe not just when you were young. Okay. Uh, we always have some webinar objectives, so I'd like to show you that by the end of the session, we hope you will be better able to understand the principles of learner autonomy, implement student choice in lesson planning and assessment, design some project-based learning tasks that promote ownership and creativity, and use reflection tools to help students track their own progress. With that, I'm going to hand over to Ruth, who's going to tell us a little bit about why this sort of concept matters.
Yeah, reporting. So basically, why is learner autonomy important? Why does it matter? I think the first most important aspect is that it enhances engagement in class. It engages students. So when students are given choices and tasks that reflect what they're truly interested in, they become more actively involved in lessons. And then they participate more and better with enthusiasm. So the other aspect, they're all interrelated, is improved motivation. So personalized learning fosters intrinsic motivation by allowing students to pursue goals that matter to them, making learning feel purposeful and rewarding. Let me just give you a couple of examples. So imagine if when you were teenagers, they give you a topic, you have to speak about that, and you may not be interested in it. So there are two aspects here. If you give teenagers topics that matter to them, for instance, they have to talk about hobbies, but instead of talking about gardening, you could give them topics such as fashion, sports, gaming. So they're gonna have to pick and choose, which will make them more involved in what they're doing, and they'll be speaking about something that matters to them. Okay, and that's how we enhance learning.
And I think, one of the great things about having AI and things like ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever we're using is that if we're no longer restrained by the texts that are in the textbook to give to students. So if the text in the textbook is not inspiring, you could generate one for your students. Obviously, check it, make sure that it's appropriate. But if you give it a very good prompt, ask for the level that they are, ask for the topic, give it the word limit, tell them you're going to be talking to this age range, then you might be able to generate things that are much more relevant to them. Okay. Or the students can generate them themselves. Obviously, with your permission, sometimes you can give them the ability to sort of do these things.
And of course, if they're talking about something that matters to them, if they get to choose it, have a purpose to connect that language to real life. Okay, they do it for a purpose and it's in a real life context. Students will use English in meaningful ways, and that naturally leads to fluent communication. So, authentic language use is also part of fostering this learner autonomy. And the biggest outcome is that giving them the ownership of their learning builds self-confidence and it helps them develop their skills to work independently and reflect on their progress. They will make a choice, they will want to learn that, they will want to use the language because they want to, they've chosen it. It's for a purpose, it's authentic. So that translates into the actual progress, they do perform better.
This is sort of symbolized in this these graphs that we can see below, then where we have on the left-hand side sort of an analysis of outcomes for personalized learning, this sort of idea that we're giving each student what is relevant to them. They're having a lot of feedback on what they want to do and guide their own learning, as opposed to some sort of traditional learning scenario. As you can see, the dark blue, excellent, and the slightly less dark blue, very good, are much bigger on the personalized learning scenario, taking up well more than two-thirds of the section, whereas you can see that in a traditional learning scenario, we're going to have like an average, which is the biggest part. Okay. Anyway, what I thought we could look at is a interesting idea. Maybe you've heard of it, the Genius Hour. This is not originally from an educational point of view, but it was the idea that Google used to have. They don't have it anymore, but had a rule allowing staff to spend 20% of their time on projects outside of their main responsibilities. So they obviously it needed to be relevant to Google, to their products, to their services, but they could explore tangents. They could see things going in a different direction, maybe something that they're more interested in than the tasks they normally have. And they let their employees do this in 20% of their time, and it was thought to promote creativity and innovation. Um, why not allow your students some freedom in researching something that they are passionate about and presenting it to the class? Perhaps one lesson a month could be devoted to these presentations, or otherwise you could give a little bit of dedicated time at the end of each lesson or at the beginning of each lesson, where they could dedicate a little bit of time to working on this. Or the other possibility is just leave off some homework once a week or something and let them do their own thing. Um, as always, I don't think we can give them too much freedom. Just obviously, we're talking about students, not Google employees. And so we're talking about students who obviously will often take the opportunity to do nothing if you give them that opportunity. But it's always best to give them some guidance to avoid the trap of not having any idea of what to research. So some ways to do this are define the topic. Don't make it a free-for-all. Give them an area of research. So let's see, what could it be? And again, you could add to these or rule some of these out as is appropriate to your age range or your students. But it could be an aspect of English speaking Anglophone life. So it could be a tradition, a festival, a cuisine, a particular dish. Um, it could be or things like sports or a certain city or area, things like that. It could be a grammar point that you've covered recently. It could be a famous English language writer or a book. Okay, that maybe they've not read it in English, but maybe their project could be to read it in English and report on it in English. It could be even a local problem that's got nothing to do with English, but something that they're interested in and they'd like to present in this way. Okay, make them write a proposal. So this is what they had to do at Google itself. So it wasn't as if they could just get away with saying, yeah, I spent 28% of my work hours on something else. They had to propose it, but and it obviously had to get approved, but they did get to choose what it was. Okay, so they have to put in my topic, so what it is, why I chose it, what I want to learn. Okay, so if they're talking about this, let's say a sport, cricket, let's say, okay, they want to learn the rules of it. They want to learn who are the best players, the main competitions, when it's played, where it's played, the team composition, things like this. Okay. And they want to talk about how they will research it. So, are they going to use a certain website? Are they going to use AI? Are they going to use books? Are they going to do interviews with people, English speaking people, people from that city, experts, things like this? And how it will be presented. Is it going to be presented in a PowerPoint display? Is it going to be presented in a written report? Is it going to be presented in front of the class? Things like that, or maybe a mixture of these things too, obviously. And
Sorry, Josh. Don just mentioned something interesting in line with what you were saying. Of course, it cannot be free for all, and you cannot expect your students to know exactly what they have to do when you ask them to be creative and explore. So Dawn was saying that she often gives them an example, and then they can go from there, but they can't use her example. That's a really good idea because providing a model, giving them something they understand while you're giving them the instructions, doing a demo is what they're expecting. And, along with the instructions, as Josh just explained, a demo always works really, really well.
and if you want to generate one, again, we always come back to AI. I really want to emphasize to people, that get it to generate these sort of things. Demos are great things for AI to do. Obviously, you'll be adjusting it, you'll be making it more relevant, maybe refining what AI produces, but it could give you some really good examples. And obviously, if you do this once, it works, then you can use some of the previous examples for your future students. So you could even have them maybe they submit them to you and they give you permission to be able to show them to other students in the future. Okay. So once you've done that proposal, the students are ready to do their research. Again, this is when we're not talking about something that just takes place over one lesson. We're talking about a progressive thing that they dedicate time over the school year or over a couple of months, so that it's recurring. They also dedicate some time research at home. Okay. Uh, Checkpoint.
Also, they're pointing out, Josh, it's just that we had a couple of comments. They're pointing out that it's also exciting for teachers, for us teachers, when learners choose what they want to do and they propose the topic. It is a bit of a change, isn't it? And it's refreshing and it's interesting and it can be quite exciting.
I think it was last webinar, maybe the one before, where people were saying in the chat that yeah, we love it when we're learning from our students. Getting the students to research and teach us. It's a great thing. So again, this is it benefits all round. That it takes a bit of the pressure off us. That we can play a bit more of a role of supporting, encouraging, but not necessarily leading the class. Okay, let the students lead for a while, as is the subtitle of the webinar, and I think the students get this sort of they get to play the teacher for a while. Okay. Make sure you have a weekly progress check. That is, they have to submit a journal entry or an update sheet. So again, they could just be noting what they've done in the last week, maybe what they're going to do in the future, and you can go around and check that. Maybe they can submit that to you through whatever you have, a classroom app or things like this. Okay, and some mini deadlines. I think this is something that's really going to be important whenever you have younger students, and I think not just younger teenagers, but teenagers in general, I think we've got to make sure that we don't give them a big, 6 month deadline because that's not realistic. Okay, it's not realistic for most people anyway to have such a big deadline. We have to have mini deadlines. So if it's going to go over a few weeks, we have like, for example, week one, the deadline is next week. You have to come to me with your topic choice. Okay. Week two, you have build on that by making a research plan. Okay. Week three, you have a draft of your progress. Week four, your presentation prep. So you're going to have something sort of a draft of what you're going to present. Okay. Again, that can be expanded out longer as well. So you could even have mini deadlines as to, you might have to have a couple of slides in week five, a couple more slides in week six, etc. Okay. You can it really works well if you do it as in a group or pairs. Just make sure everyone in that case is, as we'd say in English, pulling their own weight. Okay, you don't want to make it left up to the most keen student or the most the student with the highest level. In that case, it's often a really good idea to assign them roles. So this person is responsible for finding out this aspect. This person is responsible for making these parts of the slides or the presentation, and make sure that it's presented by everyone at the end. Okay. Visible accountability. So you can have a poster on the wall, or it could be something you're updating on a file on the computer that you can display a progress chart on the wall so that you can see who which stage each group is at, what they've been doing. And again, this lets the students, how can I say, I don't want to emphasize that it's a competition because it's not a competition, but it lets them see that they're not lagging behind, that their group is on the same level, and it sort of gets them this sense of responsibility to keep track of their own their time, their progress, and so that it's not left up to the teacher just to say that that other people are ahead of them, have prepared more. They can see that clearly, and you can just draw a student's attentions over to the progress chart, and they should be clear what they need to do, which groups need to be working harder. And teacher conferencing, so 2 to 3 minute check-ins with each student or group every week. So again, it you could dedicate some time, but at the end of that time dedicated, you need to go through and check what they've been doing. Again, these sort of deadlines are really important to get students working on this. And the creation. So the students have to produce something to share. So it can be a presentation, can be a poster. Again, depending on the level of your students, the ages of your students, they may be better at some aspects than others. It can be things like a video, it could be a podcast, an infographic, even fun things like a skit, a slideshow, or even a mini lesson. Okay? Um, and at the end, they have to present their findings to the class, obviously in English. Okay, the classmates can ask questions too. And so again, we don't want it just to be that those students stand up there and present it for 10 minutes and then sit back down. No, we need to give every student maybe has to ask a question based on it so that they are active in the process of their other students too. Okay. And again, you're encouraging the students to feel what it's like to be a teacher so that they can see that you need to make things interesting, how to respond to students, how to ask questions and things like that. Okay. One way you could do this, it could be done as part of that activity. It could be part of a shorter activity too, is a student-led news presentation. So it could be personalization through choice. So students scan trusted news and choose a story that interests them. again, when I say trusted news, you might want to restrict it to certain websites or certain news sources, just because we don't want to get in with fake news or biased news, things like that. So it's always a little bit of a danger. Okay. They prepare a 2 to 3 minute presentation for the class. Again, if I were doing this long term, the Google based one, in that case, I'd make it a bit longer. But if you're just doing for a class or a couple of classes there, or even for homework, they prepare 2 3 minute presentation. Bonus marks if they have a little PowerPoint. So again, just needs to be a couple of slides, and visuals, pictures are going to be much better than text. I mean, sorry, we've got a lot of text on our slides, but I'd be very happy for them just to have to find some relevant images that they can talk over. Okay. I would say these sort of trusted news sites are things like BBC, Reuters, Al Jazeera English is quite good as well, even though it's not as well known. CNN, other reputable outlets, but I'd make sure that you check them, or maybe find out which ones that you're going to allow before you just let a free for all. And it also gets them to um, how can I say, uh, credit where they're getting the information. And the steps, student-led process. So, first of all, they need to select a story that feels relevant or meaningful to them. They summarize it. So, write a headline. And again, we've looked in previous webinars, and I've got some links in the handout as to previous webinars. One of them is on using news in the classroom, and we've talked about doing these news reports. So it's really important to think about who, what, where, when, why, and how, and why it matters to the student, why it's interesting. Okay, so again, we're not going to ask them to present a news item or a news presentation on something that's not relevant to them. The whole idea is that they get to choose it. Okay. And optional, they can add their own perspective or a question for their peers, so it could lead into a class discussion. Right? Ideally, for high level students, I'm sure that would be ideal that they can it can become sort of a stepping off point for a classroom discussion, even a debate. And I do point your attention to the fact that next week we'll be having a webinar on debates. And then they present it to the class as a regular weekend homework for a whole semester. So again, you could have each student has to do this 1 week. So you can assign a student for each week, and it goes throughout the year. And so again, not every student will have to start preparing it at the same time, but you could let students know a week ahead of the time that it's them coming up. I mean, you can have it on the calendar, but you can remind them. And therefore, you have this interesting thing to come up each week. Someone's going to be presenting it in a different way. Peer role too, so you can share the responsibility. So instead of the students or you grading them, each student grades each other. Okay, so they could do it, for example, these are simple rubrics, so they could get a mark out of 1 to 5 or an A, B, C, D mark for these presentation skills, body language, language use, engagement, flow, structure. Um, there's a few apps that you can use as well. We've talked about in previous webinars where you can even get these, you can even let students grade these things using an app, and it'll show the results on the screen, even anonymously. So it can be quite good like that. And again, given that everyone's going to be in that seat, so the roles are going to be reversed, they maybe get to think about it, not being too hard on their peers there. And this also emphasizes that the students need to listen actively. They should be prepared to ask one question. So again, maybe you won't have time for all students to ask a question, but every student must note down a question that they want to know. Okay? And if that is answered in the presentation, they have to note down another one. So by the end, they want to know a further question. It might not be something that the person knows, but again, you could even see if that person can have some time to research it and answer it, and then they have to complete the rubric. So again, I don't want this to become a sort of once a week. One student does all the work and all the rest take the time to sort of relax at the end of the lesson. I think it's really got to be active so that all the students are paying attention to this and therefore they've got a role to play in it too. Why does this empower the students? So it gives them student choice, and that equals ownership. So it means that students drive the content by picking stories that matter to them. So again, it's going to give you an insight into what your students are interested in. It's going to allow you to the things that you actually choose as teachers are going to become more relevant because you're getting this feedback from the students. It's going to have research skills, so by scanning multiple outlets, selecting key facts, and citing sources, they really get to learn these habits that they're going to be using. Uh, if they're going on to university, if they're going on to professional work. And presentation skills, again, structuring ideas, summarizing, speaking without visuals. Maybe if you want, they could be relying on a little bit of notes, but we don't want them learning a script. It should be a bit extemporaneous. They need to own the material that is to really understand what they're talking about and they can present it. Again, it depends on the level of the students. Obviously, you could have more scaffolding, more support for the students at lower levels. The students at higher levels can have a bigger level of autonomy and fluency. So higher level students, this can be really good for. They can be using authentic language. They can maybe even give the students a few expressions or a few words that definitions of words that'll be in the text. Real world vocabulary and sustained speaking. That is, they get to speak for a certain time uninterrupted. And then obviously they'll have a discussion later. Okay. And as I said before, peer assessment is a really good idea. And I think, in our next section, which Ruth's going to be talking about task-based learning, you see how this sort of relies on peers working together and correcting each other. It really allows for a nice classroom environment. And therefore, the peer assessment helps the students internalize standards so they understand what's required when it's their turn to present. And again, it gives a sort of wider awareness. It moves students beyond this sort of narrow knowledge base of just what they're interested in. It opens them up to find out about other people's interests, other people's hobbies, other people's experiences, opening their minds and again, world perspectives too. And again, can be confidence building. Okay. It's it's low pressure. They have a lot of time to prepare for this. Um, they get models, and they're going to be judged by their peers. You're going to be saying this has nothing to do with me. It's going to be anonymous peer evaluation. So I think you can really the students can give feedback too. With that, I'm going to pass over to Ruth, who's going to talk a little bit about a method that we use in MLA in our online lessons and also in our summer centres. That is task-based learning.
So, thank you, Josh. That's exactly what we use at MLA, both in our online courses, Get Ready pre-departure courses, and also in the summer. We chose task-based learning because it makes learning meaningful. So students use English to complete real-life, authentic, relevant tasks that connect with their own interests and experiences. So it is all about them, what they want to talk about, what they want to learn. Learning a language is learning to act in the world, to be in the world. So you really need to care about it. And it develops authentic communication. It focuses on expressing ideas, negotiating meaning, and collaborating with others rather than just practicing grammar, filling in activities, gap filling activities. It's more about what they can do together, how they can use language. Language is for communication and it needs to be purposeful. And obviously, this is how we encourage learning autonomy because students take responsibility for how they approach a task. They have to make decisions and they personalize the language they're going to use. And they're always going to try and use the best language they have in order to do it well and better because they do care about what they're doing and what they're talking about. And it supports natural language growth. So this is how it goes when working with peers. Students notice and they refine the forms they're using, and language emerges from their own communication. So they make progress more individual. They listen to each other. They comment on what the other person said. They have to add extra information. They spot the other person's mistakes and they internalize that and make it better and rephrase constantly to get their message across efficiently and also to avoid making the mistakes they're listening from us.
I think it's an important point that while you might not be lucky enough as we are to use it exclusively in our courses, because obviously as teachers maybe in a school, you have to teach to a certain syllabus, but using it occasionally and using it appropriately can really benefit from this. So it can really build on all the sort of input sessions of the grammar or the vocabulary based lessons that you've been doing um, by putting all these things into practice. And we are, very grateful to all the teachers that work in the more traditional methods because our methods, this task-based learning builds on all of that. And it shouldn't be just restrained to if they join an MLA course. You should be able to integrate it to some degree into your lessons as well.
Yes, I think you can also use certain grammatical points, certain vocabulary that you ask your students to use while they're doing task-based learning. It doesn't have to be completely free, as Josh was saying at the beginning. You can actually guide it and you can be a little bit more prescriptive. For us, it's more a matter of empowering our students to understand why all that they learned in their traditional classes matters and how to use it authentically and purposefully. So let's take a look at one of the lessons from our books that we develop here at MLA. This is an A2 level task, okay? Students have to plan holiday, I believe, right? Yes, let's take a look. They have to work in pairs. Pairs, groups, that always depends, okay? It depends on the level of students, how much support they need, whether they can negotiate in groups of four. I would recommend four is the largest group, but they can do it in pairs as well. And they have to plan a holiday, so they're going to have to talk about weather and what they're going to do with different types of weather and how to react to it, the destination, transports, activities, and accommodation. So they're going to have to negotiate budgets, places, and they're going to have to persuade each other in order to come to an agreement.
This is really why there's a couple of reasons why doing it in groups or pairs is important. One is obviously it can maximize the student talking time, that they're talking to each other in a small group rather than taking turns in the whole class. But as Ruth said, by giving them one task to do that needs to be agreed on by all of them, they have to cooperate, collaborate, negotiate in this way so that each of them can contribute, but none of them has the final say on anything.
once they've decided all this, I think during the task is where you can see all that emerging language that you can work with as well. Okay. There are loads of learning and teaching opportunities while your students are doing all these collaborative tasks. And then after that, so once they've had all the feedback from you, the help, they've managed to come to an agreement, they've created something, they have their products, they present it to the class. Other students can ask them questions, and I would say should, as you pointed out earlier, Josh. If we want our teenagers to listen to each other, we need to give them a purpose to listen to each other. So it is a good idea to give them a job. They're going to have to listen to the other group's presentations and they're going to have to ask different questions, spot the difficult part, what's different, what's similar to what they did. So they need to start listening actively, not passively.
As you can see on this little bottom part of the left-hand page, we have this write a summary of your classroom's answers, of your classmates' answers. So in this case, the presentation is not the final part. They have to sort of see what are the similarities of all of it. So it shows that they can make these connections, that they've been paying attention, that they can see in general where most people would like to go, but there are some exceptions. What are some places that no one chose? What seems to be the most popular form of transport? The places people would like to stay, things like that. Lets them put all their classmates' presentations in the context of their own. And I think it can really sort of broaden their mind too.
And by doing this, by negotiating, trying to find what's the best holiday destination, they can express their creativity and opinions. And the result of that is that they're more likely to produce authentic language, to engage in real, meaningful conversations that they are interested in. They invest themselves in these tasks. There's a comment I find quite interesting here, Josh. Carla was saying that she asks her students to compare synonyms and find their contextual differences to help them express themselves more precisely. This is something that you can actually insert in the task as well. So instead of giving them the language, you can actually ask them to do a little bit of research. So you make it a little bit more challenging for them. Okay, it depends on the level, of course. Low level learners will need a little bit more input from you, a little bit more help. And then the more advanced your students are, the more you can encourage them to become independent and find their own vocabulary out there and start to use it and ask you for reassurance. That's what we want. We want to be there to make them feel that we can reassure that that's correct or not, but they have to play an active role in their learning.
I think we've got to also emphasize that when we talk about authentic language, we're not necessarily talking about, something that would be indistinguishable from a native speaker or from a fluent speaker. It can be, you can have authentic language at A1 level, you can have authentic language at C2 level. A1 level might just be sort of basic things, it can be short sentences, but it's still doing something. It's still being able to be understood. It's being able to um the other people have a reaction to it. They can respond to what the person is saying. And again, as Ruth said, we give a lot of support for that for lower level students in this, but it doesn't necessarily mean that task-based learning is any more relevant for high level students than low level students. There's something that they can do at any level with the language they've got. As soon as they learn the numbers, those numbers can be used to read out phone numbers or do some maths in in the second language. These sort of things, days of the week, things like that. All of these things from the very beginning can be used in a sort of task-based learning thing. Maybe it's going to be a bit limited and a lot of support from the teacher, but it's still going to really give the students the satisfaction to know that they might only know a little bit of English. They might still be in the first steps of their English journey, but they're already able to do things and they're already being able to communicate to people in another language rather than just being able to be told that this exercise was correct or incorrect. Anyway, coming to a conclusion, um, it's always important to remember that letting students lead doesn't mean giving up control. It just means sharing it. Okay, so again, you should be subtly directing the students into producing something that is what you want to see, in the sense that they complete the task. They everyone in the group, if they're working groups, is doing their part. Okay, but it does mean that they sort of take responsibility. When the students feel this ownership, they're going to engage more deeply and learn more meaningfully, and they're going to draw on the language in a way that is a little bit less conscious, and therefore it's going to become a lot more natural for them and will be much easier for them to use in real contexts in the future. That progress becomes natural and differentiated. So we can distinguish between like mixed level students. So even though you might have all students of the same age in your classes, I'm sure you notice that they're at different levels, and therefore they can contribute at their own level while they're all working towards a common goal. They each get to do this presentation. And again, while there might be students who have, maybe a B1 level English rather than a A2 level English, but they might still have some areas to develop on, their presentation skills, their confidence, things like that is not always going to necessarily correspond to their level of English, and that doesn't matter. It's all part of the, different aspects of their language. Personalized learning nurtures this curiosity by letting students explore their own interests in English, sparking intrinsic motivation that drives them to keep learning well beyond the classroom. I think we know that in our experience, the students who get to a high level of English, who reach the B2, the C1, even the C2 level, are students that have taken ownership and driven beyond this sort of, often students can get to like a level of B1, maybe lower B2, where they sort of realize they've got a lot, but unless they sort of are really self-motivated to go beyond that, that's where they can reach these higher levels of English. And that's going to be done not just dependent on the student's personality or personal circumstances, but how much independence you give them, how much you give them this sort of sense of ownership, self-motivation. And that's, I think, we can all speak to that by the fact that if we're teachers, we've all been given this sort of curiosity by teachers in the past who are sort of handing it on. And as they say, pay it forwards. What people have given us, we want to give to the students to allow them to reach the levels that we have. Anyway, after the webinar, you will be directed to our survey page. I'd like you to encourage you to put in your suggestions there, but you can also put them in the chat. We'd really welcome your ideas, and if you have any things that you'd like us to revisit or expand on from this or other webinars, I'd be happy to do that. Thanks a lot for your attention. As I did mention at the beginning, you will receive a certificate of participation and a webinar handout. You can email me at that website, that email address there, and I'll get that out to you. But you will receive it automatically tomorrow. It usually comes out by the end of day tomorrow. If you don't find it in your spam or in your inbox, then email me there. Our next webinar next week by great demand. I did mention it recently using debates, and we got a lot of interest in the chat. So, just to prove that we do listen to your comments and your requests, we are going to revisit our debates webinar with a bit of different content in there next Thursday. And so, we're going to be talking about using debates. Really interesting. Again, this sort of personalized learning, learner autonomy, getting students to come up with their own arguments. Again, this sort of, uh, I mean, it's a sort of task-based. You're getting the students to do something that depends on their input. Um, Join us again for that, and then following that, we're going to be going back to our Cambridge webinars that were very popular. We had one last week. Anyway, thanks a lot for your attention. Thank you very much, Ruth, for manning this webinar with me.
Thank you. My pleasure. Have a lovely evening.
Goodbye, everyone. Bye, bye, bye.
Bye.